First, before I start, some legal stuff. The content provided in this podcast is for general informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as professional advice, and listeners should not rely on it as such. The comments in this podcast are from my perspective and do not represent the opinions of my employer or any outside entities that I participate in. With that said, let's get started. When I was thinking of names for the podcast, I kept it simple, and right now I think I can just say, welcome to the podcast. The whole reason for this podcast was basically a push from a LinkedIn post about a book named Quiet by Susan Cain. At the point of this recording, that post has so many engagements. I've gotten so many messages and nearly 50,000 impressions up until this point. I also want to note that every single comment, direct message, and interaction I received was all positive. No negative interactions. I really appreciate that, and it is because of all of you that this podcast is happening. So again, to each person, thank you. To begin, I'm going to start with a Webster Dictionary definition of an introvert. An introvert is typically a reserved or quiet person who tends to be introspective and enjoys spending time alone. Now, you should note that introverts are typically more comfortable interacting with small groups of people rather than, say, large groups at a party. This doesn't necessarily mean that they're quiet or they're anxious or they always want to be left alone. It simply just means they're introverted. So let me continue with some more famous, per se, introverts. The first one I have on my list is Bill Gates, the co-founder of Microsoft. He's typically described as an introvert and known for his focus on deep thinking and analytical skills. Mark Zuckerberg, of course, the founder of Facebook, he's spoken widely about being introverted and the challenges that he's faced publicly speaking in front of people multiple times during his career. J.K. Rowling, of course, the author of the Harry Potter series, she's mentioned multiple times as well about her introverted nature in various interviews. Maybe not so shocking considering she is a writer and an author. Again, more expected. Let's move on. Warren Buffett, of course, the legendary investor and CEO. He's always labeled himself an introvert and has been noted many times saying that he enjoys spending time alone. The next one, Elon Musk, of course, famous entrepreneur and CEO of Tesla and SpaceX. He's mentioned multiple times his passion for engineering, technology, and introverted tendencies. Famous renowned scientist, physicist Albert Einstein. And the list continues. Notable famous director Steven Spielberg. Again, another introvert, but a wonderful eye for film. Now, of course, introversion and extroversion, these things run on a spectrum, so we can never say one's a minimum and one's a maximum. Again, a sliding scale. But let's continue on to some common myths about introverts. The first one that I have in bold as I go down my list is that introverts are shy. Now, while introverts might be reserved in certain social situations, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're shy. Shyness is a distinct trait that relates to social anxiety, whereas introversion is more about where individuals draw their energy. Introverts typically recharge by spending time alone rather than drawing it from a larger group, which completely makes sense when you really think about it. The next one I have here is that introverts hate socializing. Again, we're doing myths here. Introverts actually enjoy socializing, but they just prefer smaller, more meaningful interactions than large gatherings. They may need time alone afterward to recharge. The next one, introverts are antisocial. Not true. Introverts are not necessarily antisocial. They value deep connections and may have a smaller circle of friends, but they're closer friends, and they just prefer that other than a larger group of acquaintances. The next one, introverts lack leadership skills. Again, disproven by the book authored by Susan Cain. on my LinkedIn post and also noted by a lot of engagement that I had that introverts can in fact be excellent leaders. They often lead by example. They're good listeners and they consider diverse perspectives before making decisions. The next one, introverts don't like people. Introverts, in fact, can have strong and meaningful relationships. They may have a preference for one-to-one interactions or small groups, but they can form deep connections with others, and it's super important to them as well. The next one, introverts are boring. Introverts often have rich inner lives and interests. They may enjoy activities that are more solitary, such as reading, writing, and engaging in creative pursuits, but it doesn't mean that they're boring. It just means that that's what they thrive on. The next one, introverts are unhappy or depressed. Introverts may be perfectly content with their preference for solitude. Enjoying time alone doesn't necessarily equate to being unhappy or depressed. My long list continues here. Introverts can't be outgoing. Introverts, in fact, can display outgoing and sociable behavior, especially in situations where they feel comfortable or passionate about a topic. However, they just might have to recharge afterwards. The next one is a fairly common one, a very common myth. Introverts want to be extroverts. Introverts, in fact, are really comfortable with their own nature and they may not wish to change. They appreciate and value the strengths that come with being introverted. Here's a big one, and I left it for the last one on this list, that introverts can't succeed in social professions. Introverts can excel in social professions, including teaching, counseling, customer service, and the list goes on and on. And of course, they may bring unique qualities like empathy, active listening, and thoughtfulness to a multitude of these roles. And I also want to highlight that many introverts have a unique set of strengths such as deep thinking, empathy, and excellent listening skills. Referring back to my LinkedIn post, you can see the titles of many of these contributors. I have airline pilots on there, intelligence specialists, teachers, IT professionals, CEOs, and the list goes on. Now, I wanted to keep today's first podcast short. I wanted to give it, 10 minutes at the most, 15 at a max, just so you can enjoy it on a break at work or a short drive. I'd like to say for this first podcast, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking your time out of your day, evening, and wherever you may be at around the world. I do want to say in the notes of this podcast, I'll be including the best way to contact me and to learn about more upcoming episodes. And I'm going to go ahead and close this podcast by just taking 3 seconds here to remove the noise. I'll begin now. Thank you all. I appreciate everyone for listening. And until next time, best to you all.